and welcome to the Spooling Up channel. My name is Naz. Today I'm back in the Mk4 Golf GTI, and what I'm actually going to be doing is fitting coilover suspension. I'm just going to be installing it in the video, doing a little bit of a review of how the suspension was before and after, and just trying to get the car set up to exactly how I want it. So I tried to get some shots of me driving the car to try and show you sort of how the suspension behaves when it's being driven, but it's actually proved quite difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a bit more of a physical test, actually moving the car by hand to show you how soft the suspension is at the minute. So as you can see, it is quite soft, quite wobbly. It's hoping to prove that changing the suspension for coilovers will make it stiffer and better handling, but obviously compromising a little bit of comfort. Right, so here we go. Just going to go for a little drive right now, just to see if I can get any recordings of what the car sort of handles like now. It's not that bad, to be honest with you. It's quite good. The suspension's a little bit soft, but that's what's expected of sort of like a factory hatchback, I guess. Just sort of hoping that these coilovers allow me to corner a little bit more flat, give me a bit more grip with a lower center of gravity. Obviously when you accelerate as well, when the back of the car squats down, the front of it lifts up. This is a front wheel drive car, so obviously on accelerating, I guess, losing a little bit of grip as well. So it should really fight off a lot of things that I don't want. However, I do know that it's going to affect the actual ride of the car in terms of bumps and knocks. I know the suspension's going to be a lot less forgiving. It's going to be a lot harder and stuff, but aesthetically as well, I'm expecting the car to look a lot nicer. Going to try and close up that arch gap a little bit, and just in general making the car look a little bit more cleaner. Right guys, so here's how the car sits at the minute. Just going to get cracking now. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to do the front, but I'm only going to put into the video one side because it's literally going to be the same. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to start off by jacking up the front of the car and putting it on axle stands, and then I'll crack on and start to dismantle the old suspension. Right, so first things first, going to get the jack under the car, and normally this arrow here, I'm not sure if you can see it on the sill, gives you an inclination of where you can jack the car up. So I'm just going to push it in there now, get it jacked up, and then once it's up in the air, going to put the axle stand underneath. Right guys, so now the car's jacked up and ready to go. I've just put the axle stands on the sills both sides, the car's up in the air. The next thing that I want to do is take off the wheel. So I've bought myself an impact driver. You can do this with a breaker bar and various other tools, but I bought this just for simplicity and speed today. And obviously if you've got a locking wheel nut or locking wheel bolt, you're going to need the key for that as well. So first thing I'm going to do is just quickly zip off this wheel. First time using that gun, and obviously the wheel bolts were too tight for it, and rather than me putting the car all the way back on the floor to get some traction on the wheels so that they don't spin when I try and undo them, I'm just using another technique to just shock them loose, and it's working, so just be extra careful with this one. Right, that's all of them cracked off. So I'm going to use the gun for the rest of it now, and then get the wheels off and show you guys what's going on behind there. Now the wheels off, you can actually see the suspension strut here. You've got the shock absorber and you've got the spring, and it all attaches to the hub assembly. You've actually got this bolt here holding it at the back, so we'll have to undo that and then undo it from the top, but also we've got to make sure that we take off these ABS sensor wire and things like that first. It might be a bit difficult coming out of here because obviously it's been open to the elements, so first things first, gonna make sure that I give everything a good WD-40 soak up, just to try and make it that little bit easier when it comes to cracking everything off in a minute. So I'll let that soak in for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and start trying to dismantle things. The next step I'm going to take is removing this ABS sensor wire from the existing strut, just so that I can free it up and get it out of the way. Right, so that's off now. Got a bar on the nut because it's always easier to undo the nut than undo the bolt, because obviously the bolt goes through the hub carrier and it goes through the actual strut itself, so it's a lot easier to undo the nut because there's a lot less resistance on it. So you're going to hook that up there to hold against, and then so now what I'm going to do is just going to use this hammer to try and tap this bolt through. See, it's coming out the other side. Might be able to just pull it out. There we go, there's one rusty old bolt, and hopefully now I'll be able to free up the strut. So what I'm actually going to do, because I'm having some difficulty actually dropping this hub assembly off the strut, I'm going to use something called a strut spreader, and it's this tool here. What it actually does is it goes in the gap, and as you turn it, it widens it open, freeing up the actual strut itself. So I'm going to try and use this, and then hopefully then I can push this whole hub assembly down and free up the strut. Just going to quickly disconnect to the anti-roll bar by the anti-roll bar link. It comes off easily enough. So using the strut spreader, I've been able to spread it enough back here to be able to release the strut. So my next step now is to go up into the engine bay and do the nut that's up here for the top mount. So now I've got the bonnet lifted, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to pull off this cap or cover, and I'm going to use my impact driver to zip off this 21mm nut up here, and that should have released the strut. There we go. So there we go, guys. Here we have the OEM strut that I've just taken off the car. So the next step now is to put spring compressors on the spring and undo this top mount and use the original OEM bearing and a few other bits and bobs from here and transfer it onto the coilovers and then install it to the car. Spring compressors just to relieve tension off the top mount, so I can actually undo it and transfer some of these parts onto the coilovers. If you try and do it without these spring compressors and the springs under tension, then you could possibly get injured. So it's best to use these spring compressors. All I've done is I've set them up opposite each other, and all it does is when I do this, it compresses the spring, and then I'm able to take off the top mount safely. So now, as you can see, the spring is actually loose from the strut and shock absorber. So now I'm safe to undo this top nut. What you want to do is you want to keep things in order, because it gives you a better idea of how to put it back on the car. So I'm just going to leave that like that at the moment. Because as soon as you've undone the top mount, it's probably a safe bet to just quickly release the spring so that it's no longer under tension, because while it's under tension, although these spring compressors are really good, you don't want it to slip out. So just release them when you get a chance. You're gonna need it for the other side anyway. Guys, let me just show you something. You know that your mum is 1 in a million when you're out here working on your car on the morning of your birthday, hanging big time, and she makes you turkey bacon, an egg sandwich, and a fat cup of cappuccino, man. You can't beat that. Time to unbox this and see what's going on. Okay, here we go. Unboxing of the coilovers, man. Got the fronts here, and the rear shock absorbers, springs, perches and adjusters, all there. Everything's looking good. Let's take one of these off. Look at that, man. Beautiful. If you're a car guy, then you know that brand new parts always make you feel good. So guys, just to have a quick look at this right now. They're pretty nice, you know, they've got a nice finish on them. Obviously they're brand new, but I'm hoping that they're good quality. Obviously you've got the two different rates of spring here. This one's going to be a lot stiffer than this one. I'm not too sure at the minute what height I want to adjust the car to, because when I first bought the car I wanted to slam it, but after driving it for a little while and a couple of experiences that I've had in the BMW where I've gone over like a really thin but tall speed bump and the bottom of the car is scraped already at standard height, it's making me think twice. But I think what I'll do is I'll adjust it to a nice height. The rear's got to go down more than the front because there's a massive arch gap, which obviously I want to close. Guys, let's do a quick comparison, man. Look at the size difference between the two. This is a lot smaller, the new coilover. I would say it might even be a little bit heavier than the standard suspension, but overall when you look at it, it's a lot nicer to look at as well. And obviously we've got the perk of being able to adjust the ride height, and with that the stiffness of the spring, etc, etc. Right, so what you actually want to do is I'm just going to wind these all the way down for now, because for me to get an even height on the car, I'm going to wind them all the way down and then I'm going to count the turns up. I'm going to put a little mark on it and count the turns up, so I get a nice even height on the car. Obviously this isn't under load anymore because it hasn't been adjusted. So what I'm going to do is just build this back up using some of the OEM bits. So you're going to want the bearing, guys, to go here, and that obviously allows the whole assembly to turn. That's what that actual bearing's for, so you want to make sure that that's in decent condition as well. It's worthwhile maintaining things as well as replacing them. So I'm just going to smooth some of that around, drop that on. Then what you want is the OEM nut to go on as well. So I've had a few people say to me that I'm going to struggle with the anti-roll bar coming into contact with the drive shaft, so you need to fit adjustable drop links for the anti-roll bar to the wishbone. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zip this off, and then I'm going to install the new one. And then once the suspension's on, then I'm going to adjust it. There's no point in adjusting it now. I need to sort of see what kind of clearance I need for it. So at the minute, just jacking it up. The reason why I'm using a lever bar is because I don't even know what happened to the original handle for this jack, man. But using a lever bar is so much more grief as well. Just going to jack this up underneath the ball joint to raise it all up and get it to meet the mounting at the top of the car again. Right guys, so I've used a trolley jack to jack up the suspension now, so it meets up here. So the last thing you want to do is put that whole mount back up. Now you can do things up as you go along, but the reason why I haven't is because I know I'm not going to forget to do them, and I also wanted to see how everything fitted before I start putting everything back together. Last thing you want to do is put everything back together and then you've got to take it apart again because you've done a wrong adjustment or something and it's already tight, so just causes a bit of grief. So yeah, that's that for now. I'm gonna start putting everything back together tight, do the adjustment. So at the top, I'm gonna gun this up a little bit and then I'm gonna torque it to its correct setting just so that it's at the right tightness. All right. Right guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the torque wrench that I've got here to torque up this top mount bolts to 44 pound-feet. I bought this torque wrench, it wasn't expensive at all, but you just want to push it until there's a click and then you know that you've got the desired torque setting for that arrangement. It's the same down here for the pinch bolt, guys, but the only thing is that it's suggested to replace this because it's actually a stretch bolt, so it actually stretches over time, so apparently it's never going to be the same again, but I'm going to reuse this one anyway. I'm sure most people do, and that also goes up to 44 pound-feet of torque, so I'm going to do that as well now. So what I've actually done here is I've put a black mark on the top ring so that I can count the amount of turns as it goes up, and I think I'm going to adjust it to about halfway at the minute and then see where the car sits, and if I want to adjust it I will adjust it again, but I'm just going to adjust that up now and then I'm going to lock the bottom one onto it using the 2 C-spanners that come with the kit. Right guys, the front of the car is now down. Have a look at it, man. I think it's looking really good. I think, do you know what, yeah, it's one of those things, doesn't happen often, but I feel like I've got first time luck and got a decent height. I've obviously got to put the back down yet, and that will even things out a little bit, and it will probably raise the front up the slightest bit, but that arch gap that I wanted to eliminate is gone. So happy with that, man. So happy with that, guys. If you're thinking about lowering your car, I haven't driven it yet, but right now, over the moon. So I'm going to move on to the back of the car now. First things first, got to take these covers off the wheel bolts, and then this time what I'm going to do is, because I made the mistake last time of thinking that that impact driver that I bought would be powerful enough to undo these wheel bolts. I'm going to crack the wheels off while the car's on the floor and then use the gun once it's up in the air. So let me crack on with that now. Just going to use a breaker bar and a 17mm socket and just crack them off. So guys, just going to jack the rear of the car up, same sort of place I jacked it up at the front, and then slide the axle stand underneath, then jack up the other side and then start getting everything stripped and ready for the new suspension. Guys, simple thing, man, it's going to make your lives a lot easier. Wire brush and some kind of penetrating oil, that's what I'm using. Just brush it all up, clean the threads, and make sure that you're more likely to get it undone nice and easily that way. So just clean it up, bit of WD-40, man, let it soak, and then hopefully when it comes to undoing it, it's a lot easier. Time to undo this now. What I've done to help me is I've used a socket and like a wobbly extension so you can get a bit of an angle on it. So this knuckle at the top, it's like this, it's tapered so that the socket's got some movement on it. Get you out of a sticky situation sometimes, but if not, you can just use 2 spanners anyway. Gonna have to use a ratchet on that, or work it backwards and forwards. managed to undo it for now, guys. Make sure that you try and keep your nuts, bolts and everything else tidy and in one place so that you don't lose anything or kick anything. Just gonna go ahead and zip off the top. There's one. Right guys, so I've removed the top 2 bolts on that top mount. As you can see, it's freed up the shock absorber. So what you need to do is get rid of this bolt down here, pull that out, give it a little wiggle if you want, but we'll get that there out, and then you can push down on the axle and pull the spring out. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to push down with one hand and pull the spring out with my other. There you go. One spring, rear spring off. Right guys, so the next thing you want to do, now that you've got the old shock off, is to pull off this cover at the top. Get yourself a 16mm spanner and some grips. Like so, and just begin to undo this nut. You can't put the gun on it because it does just spin, so you just need to hold the center still and wind that nut off till you get it off, and then we're going to be transferring all of this onto the new shock absorber for the coilover. So the next step's pretty simple. Now that you've taken all of this off the old shock absorber, all you need to do is slide that on. Slide on the washer, provided it already comes on the coilover, that just sits down the bottom there. Get your old top mount, slide that on as well, and then you can use the new nylock nut that's provided with the kit to just slide on the top, and then it's the reversal of how you took it apart. You can just use the grips and spanner and just get that nicely seated down at the bottom. So what I'm going to do, now that I have this assembled and ready to go back on the car, what I'm going to do is I've turned these all the way down again, right to the bottom, so I can count how many turns I get and get it as even as I can. So this, guys, that just sits here. What I've done actually as well, before putting this on, I've wire brushed around there just to make sure that it sits nice and even, rather than having a load of old rust and stuff sitting it there off balance. So literally get the bolt and washer and then screw that on, get that sitting nice and in the center, because it's actually conical. The seat for this is conical, so it's cone shaped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that up with a spanner at the bottom or ratchet, whatever, and then I'm going to start building the rest of it up together. Right guys, so I'm going to give myself another reference mark on this one. Just going to put another line on it here like I did with the front, so that I've got a reference point and I can count how many turns I'm going. With the rear, I'm going to go a little bit lower than I did on the front, because the gap at the back arch is quite big. So just going to spin it up, count the turns, and then seat everything back in, and then hopefully everything's looking nice. Right, my next step is going to be to put everything back together using the flat side of the spring, guys, on this perch down here, so that it sits there nicely. All right, and then it should be centered by this mounting here. So what I'm going to do as well now is put my shock absorber back in. I've got the trolley jack underneath the axle, so I can jack the suspension back up and get the top mount to meet the car itself, because it's quite far away now. All I'm going to do is slide this back in here, get the bolt, slide it back through, and then get my nut, put it on, jack this all back up. As it meets the car, I'm gonna put my 2 bolts back in the shock absorber, and then that is this side done. Also guys, what you want to do is you want to remove these old rubber top mounts off the old springs, and you want to put it on your new spring so it locates properly at the top of the car before you put it all back up as well. Right guys, so if you set your car up correctly, this is what it should look like. You should have the shock absorber bolted back up to the top of the car and bolted at the bottom to the axle. You should have your perch and then the plastic seat that goes on top of the perch, black plastic seat, and then you should have the spring with the old rubber bushing at the top located correctly onto the car. And then the next thing left to do is just to put the wheel on and sit the car down and see where it's sitting. I've just come back to the Golf. It's been a couple of days since I've lowered it now, and the front of it's probably dropped a little bit too much, so I'm gonna just have to raise it now, and I think I'm gonna drop the back a little bit because it's still a little bit high at the rear. But yeah, just gonna adjust these, get a little bit more height on the rear, because where it stands at the minute is way too low. That's gonna hit like every speed bump. Right, so it's now been exactly a week actually since I put the coilovers on the car, and they actually, after settling a little bit, because I sort of left the car there because I was unable to drive it because I was at work and stuff, and they settled while the car was sitting there, and it actually ended up being too low at the front. In the video I actually say that I think it's one of those things where you actually get it spot on first time. It looked spot on then, but unfortunately I've had the wheels on and off probably about 5 times yesterday trying to adjust the coilovers to get them to the right height, but now they're at a good height. I can actually glide over speed bumps. I don't really have to slow down that much at all, and it's not a situation where I'm sort of going over a speed bump and cringing, waiting to like hear the bottom of the car scrape or like the exhaust catch or anything like that, for example. But I'm really happy with the ride they've given me. It's a lot more solid, and I like that. I suppose the fact that I've still got the standard wheels and tyres on, I'm making the ride a little bit better at the minute. Obviously because there's a lot more cushion there, it's going to be a lot more forgiving. The tyres are going to absorb some of the pounding you're going to get from the road. But yeah, I like it. I like the fact that I can feel the road a lot more through the car, rather than sort of gliding over and feeling like I'm in a boat. Cornering wise, definitely a lot better as well. Can definitely take corners at a higher speed, but because it's been wet, mostly on the days I've been able to drive the car, I haven't really been able to push it that much. But yeah, definitely worthwhile doing. And I was getting the slightest bit of contact on the drive shaft from the anti-roll bar, but all I've had to do is adjust the anti-roll bar links a little bit more, and that's eliminated that completely. When I do decide to put different wheels and tyres on though, I will definitely change the anti-roll bar for maybe either an uprated one for a Mk4 Golf, or I've heard that the R32 one or the one for the Audi TT are both quite good options. And if you can hear rattling around in the back, it's just where I've left a load of tools in there yesterday, because I was driving the car and then I was pulling it over, jacking it up, adjusting the coilovers, putting it back down on the floor, driving for another 5 or 10 minutes and then adjusting the fronts again. But yeah, like I said, at the moment I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll just have to see how it goes over the next couple of weeks. Right guys, so as I was saying earlier in the video, it is really difficult to sort of try and show a comparison of the suspension in terms of how it's performing. You can see the differences by looks, but to actually see how it performs and see how it's more stiff and things. The only way I can put it into perspective for you guys is to actually move it myself. So I'm just going to do that again. We'll start with this side. So if you watched previously, the car moved a lot more. Alright guys, so I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thank you very much for coming to watch it. I've certainly enjoyed making it, and I've enjoyed installing the coilovers. If you'd like to see any more upgrades being done to any of the cars that are featured on the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. Thanks.